Hi, everybody. It's Barry Rosen with our sneak preview of Secret of the Houses. Thank you for joining us this early. I know some of you are in California, and it's pretty early there, 7:30. I one of the reasons I do this time is also I have to catch people in India, and it's like 8 o'clock in India at night. So um, let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to do today. I tend to a little bit hide behind the camera because it's kind of hard for me to look at myself on the screen while I'm kind of doing the presentation, but I'll keep it up for just a little bit. Um, those of you know my website at appliedvedicastrology.com, and you probably know me from Facebook, Mary Rosen, Astro Yoga, Spiritual Astrology, and things like that. What we're going to do today is we're going to do an overview of hidden qualities of the 12 houses. Um, um, I'm very kind of fascinated by the psychological and spiritual dimensions of the houses. So sometimes when you study houses in basic Vedic astrology, they'll say, oh, fourth house is mother, ninth house is father, third house is siblings and things like that. And that's, in India, they're very interested in relatives. So those are things, but all those houses have much, much, much more depth and incredible deep analysis of somebody's life by understanding the houses. So my goal today is to reveal things that you don't know about the 12 houses today, and then also to talk about some techniques that we'll study. Um, this is kind of an overview. This is like the ocean in a drop. So the class actually is going to be about 18 weeks starting on Sundays, May 5th. If you miss a class, they're recorded and you can listen to them again. And this is special if you purchase the whole course of $375. It's an 18-week course. My classes tend to run about $25 a class, which is pretty reasonable. And then if you need payment programs, I can always work with you with PayPal invoices and things like that. But I do this because I have a passion about it, and I'm very, the houses is one of my most exciting things. I mean, many of you have seen my book, Secret of Finding Your Blind Spots Using Astrology. I've got about 75 pages on the houses in there, and obviously that's just the tip of the iceberg. Um, to expand that material into a 300 or 400-page book, and so this course is being done to help me kind of get ready to write that new book. So very excited about this material. One of the things that one of the formats for today's class is I'm going to keep the mics muted for now. Um, I usually have a lot of material to go through, and I will pause and take questions. I don't have a moderator today, so it's hard for me to. You can type in questions. I will get to them and see them. And I can at some point unmute you all and at the end of the class, and you can open up the class for questions. So it will be more of a kind of a lecture format. The other thing about class today is it's a little bit more abstract. In my classes, I will illustrate principles very with examples from your charts if you choose to uh, give your chart information to me, or I uh, I will use famous people's charts like most people do. But today's class I don't have a lot of examples because I'm trying to get through kind of key core principles. So that's kind of what we're going to do today. I always start my classes with some chanting. I mean, for those of Vedic astrologers used to be kind of the village priest, and they used to study mantras, and they prescribe mantras and do Vedic ceremonies. And actually, I'm very involved in that because it's kind of the essence of the tradition. So we're going to start with some chanting. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha. Vakritunda Mahakaya, Suryakoti Samabraha, Nirvigyam Kurame Deva, Sarvakareshi Sarvada. Jnana Mula Ti pujamulam guru padam, panchamulam guru vakyam, mokshamulam guru kripa. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva, Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Param Brahmaha, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Dam Durgaye Namaha, Om Dam Durgaye Namaha, Om Dam Durgaye Namaha. Sahana Bhavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahai, Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vivishai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Aditaye Samaye Mangale Buddhaye Cha Guru Shukra Shani Vischa Rahave Ketave Namaha. Honoring the great ones, Lord Krishna, Goddess of Wisdom Saraswati, Vedavyasa, Cognizer of the Vedas, and my holy tradition going back to Brahmananda Saraswati. Okay, so let's begin with today's talk. Let me pull up another slideshow. Okay, again, here's my contact information. So again, this class is going to be on Sundays, and there's two parts to the class. So I did this for flexibility. I actually attract kind of students that are more seasoned in Vedic astrology, but I also teach the courses on such a fundamental level that people who are new can kind of pick up deep things. So I'm going to be teaching some more advanced things on the first part of the class. Things like Dr. Rashi, which is kind of how the houses can be colored by hidden psychology and kind of blocks. Things like Bhattaka, which is also kind of these hidden blocks that maybe prevent the houses from manifest. Things like Argala, which are these kind of hidden bolts that kind of block or support energy in the chart. And what happens is, people always wonder, they think they have a good house or they have good planets in it, or there's an exalted planet in it, and they kind of wonder why something isn't manifesting. And that's the whole thing about Vedic astrology. It's like strands of DNA. You have to look very deeply at many different factors, and all these kind of hidden factors in the chart. And we're often come into life with karma, and so there's always some kind of shadow that's kind of blocking energies and stuff from manifesting. And sometimes you do just get these incredible things that manifest in the chart and that just work really well because you've worked out those issues. So a large part of the first part of the course, maybe 4 or 5 lessons, is going to talk about kind of these hidden psychological blocks and hidden elements and things that happen. I also have a lesson or a section on Secret of the Elements and these kind of the Achilles heels of some of the rising signs and how those impact the houses and things like that. So I try to bring in kind of rich new material, and that we'll have a preview of some of that material toward the end of the lesson. So my goal with my classes is always to find new and creative ways to talk about houses and material in a deeper spiritual and more psychological way. And I find that I'm a Scorpio rising, and so I'm always very kind of interested in depth and psychology. And I think if we kind of understand how we work and what's kind of blocking us, that's the first kind of step in unlocking, manifesting our desires. So we do want to bring in some new techniques and ways to look at things and things that sometimes that aren't often taught. And I've one of the problems with Vedic astrology is that you get these Indian books and they use all these Sanskrit terms, and then you kind of, your mind gets blocked because you hear a lot of Sanskrit. So I try to translate everything into English and to even develop new terms for the Vedic terms, because otherwise the mind somehow shuts off. I mean, I studied Baba Suchika many years ago, which is kind of important for prediction, and but that term immediately turns the brain off, and it means house transposition, the way a house in a sign moves from the Rashi chart, the natal chart, to the Navamsha chart, the D9 chart. I don't want to teach things that you have in basic books. So one of the things that won't happen in the class is, everybody teaches Lord of the First and the Fourth, or Lord of the First and the Ninth. And those things are important, but they're in all the books. They're cookbooks. You can always look them up. Those are things that I may tangentially cover in the course, but that's not what I want to do with this class. It's really to go much deeper, and that's my goal. Sometimes I give you extra videotapes to listen to. They're kind of bonus videotapes. You don't have to listen to them, but you can just show up live to class. But there's 18 lessons in the class, and actually sometimes you'll get 22 videotapes out of it. And again, if you sign up for the class, I'll send you my book, Finding Your Blind Spots, as a gift. It has 72 pages on secrets of the house, and we'll provide a core reading for it. So we want to take a fresh approach to looking at the houses, looking at the psychological level, their spiritual level, their past life levels. And we're going to kind of do that. So let's get a kind of clue about that. Now, one of the things that houses kind of apply to many different charts, and I always teach, one of the classes I taught was kind of multi-dimensions of awareness. And there are many ways, there are many different charts, and we get kind of stuck on our rising sign, which is kind of the physical manifestation of our body, and we kind of think that's our chart. But the chart rotates. It rotates around the dasha lord. So if you're in a Rahu period, Rahu moves to the first house, and you take on a lot of Rahu characteristics in your Rahu period. So you have to read the chart from the dasha lord. And then there's a thing called the Aruda Lagna, which isn't taught enough, which is about perception. It's connected to the moon. And it's actually one of the most important charts to kind of do physical predictions to. It's about illusion, but it's kind of like how people see us. So like I'm Scorpio rising, but my Aruda Lagna is Capricorn, and I have Venus in Capricorn. So people actually see me as this kind of friendly business person, which I am, and the Aruda Lagna is very true. And I'm very good at networking, and I'm a very, the Aruda chart is very powerful in some ways. It's got exalted Saturn in the ninth, but and it really is me, and that's how people see me, but how I feel may be my natal chart, which has debilitated moon in the first. So I may not, how people see me and how I feel are very different. So you have to look at houses from the Aruda Lagna also. And then the moon chart is important. It governs our mental attitude, and often, there's, that's not studied enough. The sun chart, which is how we show up in the world, is another chart where you count houses from. So, the 4th and the 10th from the sun chart are very important. They show what we love to do most and what we end up doing most because we dharmically have to do it. So, there are so many different ways. We don't want to get stuck in just one chart. We have to look at many charts. So let's go through the houses. This will probably take over an hour to do, and I'm trying to give you material that you may not think about. So sometimes people think the first house is the mind. Well, it's not. It's the intelligence. It's actually the physical body, but it's also the intelligence that synthesizes the whole chart. To me, I like using the analogy. It's kind of like the operating system, of Windows, and when you have the latest, if you have the latest version of Windows and with all the extra bells and whistles, the operating system runs really well. Maybe you don't know how to use it, but it does run really well. But if for some reason you haven't upgraded your computer to 2.0, and let's say your chart has your first house has a lot of malefics in it, like Saturn, that's kind of weak, or the chart Lord is kind of afflicted, then your operating system kind of doesn't work very well. So the mind is the intelligence. First house is the intelligence that synthesizes everything. It's the alert mind, and the intelligence. And actually, the real mind is located in the 25th nakshatra. You can learn that in a nakshatra class. That's the 25th nakshatra from the moon. Really kind of tells you how your mind operates. The third house is also connected to the mind. It's connected to the lower negative mind that expresses aggression, sexual urges, and basic desires. I call it kind of the primal mind. And It kind of does run us. I mean, it's connected to Mars, and it's about kind of protecting our territory. Mars is connected to fighting, so we have to fight for our territory. We have to. It also kind of covers kind of core level sexual urges and energies and aggression and stuff like that. So it is part of the mind. It's kind of, I call it the primal mind. The fourth house is also connected to the mind because it's the seat of happiness in the heart. It's our emotional nature, and so planets in the fourth house affect how we feel. It's very important. The fifth house is kind of the spiritual mind, but it's also where we our judgment is. So if you have malefics in the fifth house, like Saturn or Rahu, you may not learn from your mistakes. If you have Jupiter or well-placed planets in the fifth house, the fifth house lord is strong, then you kind of you don't make the same mistakes. There's some people that you meet and they're always making the same mistakes, and they probably have a weak fifth house. They just don't learn from their mistakes. Whereas if you have a strong fifth house, then you kind of learn from your mistakes. The sixth house is also kind of connected to the unconscious mind because it's kind of our vices, it's kind of our habits, and it's not totally. I mean, we're aware of it. We may overeat. We may have a problem with anger or something like that. The sixth house is connected to vices, and sometimes they're unconscious. They're often unconscious. We don't really see them. And they just kind of, we start feeling a certain way and we run to the refrigerator to eat something or something like that. So the sixth house is also connected to the mind. And the eighth house and the 12th house, we can say, are also connected to the mind, and they represent the kind of the mystical or transcendental area of the mind that we experience in deep meditation. And so all these aspects are very connected to the mind. Now, one of the secrets of the first house, which many of you know, is that you may think you're your rising sign, but the placement of your chart lord will actually give you more of your real rising sign. And so, for example, I'm Scorpio rising. Now, Scorpio has dual rulership. It can be ruled by Ketu or Mars. In my chart, Scorpio is ruled by Ketu. And my Ketu is located in Gemini. And I'll just pull up my chart real quickly. I'm not obsessed with my chart, but I use it because I can kind of quickly have it open. Now let's pull up somebody else. Let's pull up Jackie Kennedy. I'm using Southern India because it's a lot easier. So here's Jackie Kennedy. Jackie Kennedy's Libra rising, and so yes, she certainly has some qualities of Libra rising, but it turns out because her Venus is in Taurus, she really has more of kind of a Taurus energy, and she's got Jupiter in Taurus. So, and she was kind of Taurus is the most material sign of the zodiac. Certainly, she grew up in great wealth, and she continued to have great wealth. But so where the sign that the ascendant lord is located in will have more of a say on your personality than your actual rising sign. The rising sign is important, of course, but the actual the sign that and the planets that are conjunct with the ascendant lord will actually have more of an impact. So, for example, somebody who's Capricorn rising and has Saturn in Cancer, they actually have more Cancer energy, experiencing more disorientation toward security issues and protection. Cancer is always about wanting to feel safe. Put Saturn in Cancer, it distorts that energy quite a bit. But it does give the person you can't. They are Capricorn rising, and they're going to have those business qualities and things like that. But because Saturn is in Cancer, the chart lord is in Cancer, they're going to really have more dominant Cancer energy. So we talked about the operating system. Now, sometimes when the chart lord is afflicted in the first house, it's kind of like you have your software isn't working, and say maybe you haven't upgraded ever from Windows 3.0. And you just the intelligence doesn't function. You don't see everything. You don't integrate your world very well. So you have to upgrade. You have to do remedies to upgrade your software with mantras and gems and things like that. One of the things too, and most people do know this, is that planets in the first house kind of dominate the personality. Um, they're you know, it's kind of like you own, you're renting a house, and you put in, um, let's say you put in a really good person. Let's say you put in Jupiter in the first house, or Venus in the first house. They take really good care of your property. Whenever you go over there, the house is really clean, and you just love them because they're Venus and Jupiter. And then sometimes you rent somebody and you don't check them out too well, and they've got Rahu in the first house. They're kind of a shady character. They kind of they bring their druggy friends over, and they have late night parties, and then the neighbors are complaining and things like that. So the planets in the first house can take over the personality and create a dominant energy for the first house. I mean, I'm teaching my Rahu class later today, and I was looking at Roseanne Barr's chart for that class. Where did she go? Roseanne Barr is, everybody knows her from Roseanne and her TV show, and she got fired by ABC this year. But she's got Rahu conjunct her ascendant here. She's Capricorn rising. She's got Rahu conjunct the ascendant here. It gives her just very strong Rahu personality. If you talked about Roseanne as a Capricorn rising, as kind of a hard-nosed business person who is very strict and conservative, you're totally missing the point. Rahu is taking over the chart by being in the first house, particularly when it's that close to the ascendant. She's a larger-than-life personality. She's outrageous. I mean, she's a total rebel in everything that she does. If you remember, many years ago, when she married her co-host, and they were having a menage a trois with another woman, she came out and said, "Oh, we're going to get married together," because she was just touting her menage a trois, and it was she's just so Rahu's taken over this Capricorn chart. So the planet in the first house can really kind of take over the chart. And whenever you're doing a first house analysis, you have to kind of look at more things than just the traditional things that you're looking at. Now let's go to the second house, one of my favorite houses. Everybody likes it. The second house is about savings and food. It's not about income. In fact, people always talk about the second house as a money house, but it's really about family, early childhood, the food we take into our body, how well we're good at saving money. The second house is what's called an Artha house. It's a wealth house connected to the material world. It's naturally connected to the other Artha houses, which are the 6th and the 10th houses, which means that daily work and career status lead us to saving money, and there's no surprise that those 3 houses are connected. Traditionally, the second house is connected to Jupiter, but we also have to think about Venus, because Venus owns Taurus. One of the things that people forget in Vedic astrology is that you have to remember that the natural signs of the zodiac are just as important. So Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. Taurus is the second sign of the zodiac. So this Taurus is very connected to the second house, and which is why it's very connected to food and pleasure and money and banking and things like that. So whenever we think of the second house, we have to remember Jupiter is the traditional character of storage. Put Jupiter in the first house, we get fat. It likes to store things. So you want Jupiter in the second house. It gives you the ability to save. Venus in the second house is also very good with money. So you want Venus in the second house. It wants to save. You don't want Saturn or Ketu or Rahu in the second house. They're not very good about saving money, and they'll give you weird food habits. The second house is connected to family, early childhood, and the ancestry that we inherit becomes an expression of how we're raised. So we often look at, we're born in the first house, we move into the second house, which is a place of where our values grow. I mean, our childhood does shape us quite a bit. So whenever you're looking at early childhood personality, you look at the second house. And as we grow, we outgrow our family and we change our values and we get into the third house. But but our family teaches us how to eat, how to consume. They teach us about money. They teach us about values, about our identity. Um, so Taurus and the second house become choices of what we eat, buy, and what sustains our comfort. Um, and the second house, to me, is really key for understanding our family and nourishment and what we um, what we're fed and what we enjoy. Eating problems are intimately connected to family problems. If you don't feel loved and nourished, then you end up trying to get food from food rather because it didn't come from your family, and you end up with eating disorders. I mean, my wife has K2 in the second house, and her mother was obsessed with her being thin, and it created a huge problem for her because she, her mother wasn't loving; she was punitive, and so what happened was, she did become overweight, and the love that she didn't get from her mother, and it turned into an eating disorder. So it's kind of fascinating the way planets in the second house are kind of tied to nourishment, love, family love, and how that connects to food. Um, it also shapes our attitudes towards money. If we have in my financial astrology class, we talk about the second house and planets in the second house and owners of the second house and how that impacts our ability to save money, to accumulate wealth, and usually it's very complicated. Now let's go move to the third house, which I said is, when people usually teach the third house, they say communications, brothers and siblings. That's pretty boring. When you really study the third house, it's a very kind of key house because it's connected to sex and violence, and this is why Hollywood is so into. Third house is very connected to movies and artistic expression. You can see why Hollywood is so into kind of sex and violence because it's a natural part of the third house. Um, Mars is considered the karaka, or the significator for the third house, and it's about protecting its territory. It's also about procreation. One of the things that we forget, obviously, sex is kind of a primal energy because we need to produce children to procreate the race, and animals, obviously, they just are part of nature, and they naturally kind of have that innate instinct to procreate in order to continue the race. So it's kind of a primal energy, part of the reptilian brain, and when it gets out of control in the third house, you get all kinds of problems. I'll show you Bill Cosby's chart. He's got Venus, and I think he has Venus and Rahu in the third house. Let's see if I can pull that up real quickly. Okay, here's Bill Cosby. He's got Venus and K2 in the third house, opposing Rahu. Now, Venus, Venus is obviously connected with the senses and sensual energy. And whenever you put a planet on the Rahu K2 axis, it creates this kind of love-hate relationship. I don't want it, I want it. I don't want it, I want it. And so, obviously, it became kind of a core driving energy in his chart. And obviously, I think he got eventually convicted of all these date rape situations. But he was kind of out of control. And so you've got Venus and Taurus, which makes him having a very strong sexual energy. And Venus is not a good planet for Pisces rising. It owns the 8th house. So it's kind of like it gave him this kind of problematic situation. And so I gave a whole talk on the third house at the Sedona Vedic Astrology Conference last year. I'm kind of fascinated about it. The natural third sign of the zodiac is Gemini, and Gemini in Sanskrit comes from the word Mituna. Mituna means copulation, and so when I look at people's charts, I sometimes really you can kind of see their challenges in that area. But the other part of the third house, don't forget, the other side of sexuality is creativity. We always see great artists who have, they're either highly sexed or they create incredible art. And they're usually both, but there's usually a lot of creative energy in the third house. The secret of the third house is that you have to use the third house to create art or create poetry or write. Otherwise, the unconscious sexual energy kind of drives you down. The other problem with the with the third house is it's connected to Mars, and the third house is connected to siblings. The third house, you know, we have siblings because it learns us to compete. And I remember reading a wonderful book on siblings. You know, most people don't get along with their siblings. I mean, particularly when they're young, because they're kind of fighting for their charity. They're fighting for their family's love, and the third house is about kind of protecting our territory. Third house is also connected to neighbors, and you kind of think about when you have problems with neighbors or loud neighbors or neighbors that are out of control. You can see this in the third house. But third house, we're kind of protecting our home, we're protecting our territory, and so it's Mars has also this kind of wild, aggressive energy too. It's about fighting. Adolescence is kind of ruled by Mars. It's a time when young men kind of get rowdy and start kind of doing crazy things, and it's part of what happens in the awakening of the third house. So the bright side of the third house is it's a place where we find our courage to express our interests and to develop our individuality. And Mars is about ego and developing individuality. And so when we move away from family and go to college in the third house, we're kind of starting to find out who we are. It's a Kama house. Kama means it's a house of desire. So it can be not only associated to sexuality, but it can be associated to pleasure, and that can be for youth going to, involved in the third house, it means, going to the bars, and getting drunk and things like that. It's a kind of typical thing that happens in adolescence. But the third house helps us develop and integrate our personal strength. It enables us to exert and shape our world. It gives us the courage to move forth in the world, to communicate, be curious, to dance in the complex world. It's a place where we learn to live in the world. So it's considered a growth house, but if we don't grow out of adolescence, and we continue to kind of express unhealthy sexual desires, as we saw in the case of Bill Cosby, we get into trouble. Let's talk a little bit about the fourth house. Fourth house, obviously, everybody talks about it as home and mother, and obviously that's connected. But the fourth house is a moksha house. In the Vedic trilogy of houses, and we'll study this, there's the fourth house, the eighth house, and the 12th house. And they're the water signs, and the natural water signs of the zodiac: Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. And moksha, they're connected with moksha or liberation. Now, moksha on the highest level is attaining enlightenment, but most of us, are not blessed enough to kind of reach enlightenment in this life. And so often moksha, one form of, moksha houses can be connected to sleep, to checking out, to getting involved in mystical experiences because we can't deal with the emotional challenges of the world. So the 4th, 8th, and 12th houses have this kind of emotional charge to them, and they usually bring up a lot of emotional and psychological grunge, and we can't deal with it. So ideally we turn to meditation to kind of, transform that energy. When we don't turn to meditation, we usually get into addictive patterns and have difficult psychological breakdowns. So the 4th house is a little bit more troubling than most astrologers want to admit. It's a place where, it's naturally connected to the moon, and moon and Venus are the planets that do well in the 4th house, because, Venus is connected to love, moon is connected to desire and to emotion, and so those two planets do the best in the 4th house. But most of us, if we have malefics in the 4th house, there's often deep emotional wounds connected to our mother, our family life, and those kind of translate into problems in, sometimes even physical houses. I mean, if you have a lot of malefics in the 4th house, maybe you didn't have a good relationship with your mother, and that then manifests into, every time you buy a house, something breaks down, or you have major problems in your physical home, and they're all connected. Obviously the fourth house is connected to the heart and the heart chakra. It's a place where we learn to cope with experiences and feeling and emotional wounds. So it's kind of a very vulnerable place, and um, it's very important. It does represent our kind of emotional happiness. It's the house of contentment. And um, for the most part, what happens is I often see spiritual seekers have afflicted fourth houses, which means they're not happy, and it propels them to the other moksha houses to find spirituality and enlightenment, because their home life and their emotional life is not happy, and so they search. K2 is particularly difficult in the fourth house. It's called Marka Karstana. It tends to create deep satisfaction. K2 is a wanderer. It wants to find enlightenment. And you put K2 in the fourth house, it can't settle into domestic life. Another thing about the fourth house, of course, it does represent married life and making a home. And K2 hates the fourth house. It can't handle marriage. It wants to go off and wander around India and find a guru and get enlightened. So K2 is one of the more difficult problems in the fourth house. But the other thing is the fourth house is connected to our sense of safety and comfort, because what's our primal concern is our moon. Our mother, is the one who kind of nurtures us and protects us and gives us a sense of safety and comfort when we're growing up. If mother is not at home, if the fourth house is afflicted, if fourth house lord is in the 12th, your mother's not there, then it creates kind of a really kind of deep emotional scar. But again, this is the type of thing, this lack of emotional security then starts the cosmic journey toward liberation. We want to move to the other moksha houses to find bliss and knowledge and happiness and meditation in order to get rid of these early childhood wounds of the fourth house. Fifth house. The fifth house is a house of creativity, expression of love and passion. It's that what we, I always like to say the fifth house is about enthusiasm. It's that which we love to do most in the world. It's about, traditionally people talk about it as kind of our hobbies and artistic expression. It's that which we love to do most in life. It's our passion. And when the fifth house is blocked, put Saturn in the fifth house, our passion is blocked. We have trouble being passionate. So I often look at the fifth house. People, even when people come to me and they're having trouble with work and stuff like that, you see kind of there's no passion in their work. Now my work, my 10th house is connected to my fifth house, so I've always had a passion for work, for astrology or for whatever I'm doing. But when the fifth house has a lot of blocks in it, then we don't have passion. We don't have artistic expression. Um, um, the fifth house is kind of this wild spirit that wants to shake you out of a boring and sleepy life, out of the indulgence of everyday work, and to discover your passion. So the fifth house is considered, actually, even more than the ninth house, is probably the most important house, to really kind of make you alive, to make you enthusiastic, to make you passionate. The fifth house, as I said earlier, is also about judgment. We don't want to repeat our mistakes. If we have malefics like Rahu or Ketu or Mars or Saturn in the fifth house, it may impair our judgment, and then we don't learn from our experiences. We keep making the same mistakes over again, and we can study that in more detail in the class. Again, the fifth house shows us that which we love most. And for example, if the fifth house is a fire sign like Sag or Aries or Leo, you get, the fire signs are into kind of competition. You often get athletes that are, I would say if you look at a majority of athletes, you'll see that maybe their rising sign is a fire sign. That means their fifth house is a fire sign. And they're all into kind of competition in sports. And they have, this passion about playing ball. And it's, some people are lucky they get paid millions of dollars, but if you think about it, the sports industry is just an absolutely huge industry. We spent, many people on the weekends are glued to watching a soccer game because they're watching these people who are totally passionate and in the moment expressing this total joy and enthusiasm for what they love to do most, which is to play in the fifth house. So the fifth house, has that passion, and we're all attracted to the fifth house for its passion. You think about athletes, put Mars in the fifth house, in a fire sign. You have to be involved and passionate about sports. It's something that you need to do. Children are also a fifth house signification. That's what most people talk about for the fifth house. Also, the ninth house is connected to children too, um, um, but it's kind of like if you know people, if you have children, if you know people who have children, we're totally passionate about our children. They're like the most important things in their life because they have that innate joy of the fifth house. They have that enthusiasm and love. When we get grandchildren and little babies, we just love their innocence and enthusiasm and love, which eventually gets destroyed. But it's because of that basic fifth house love of enthusiasm and joy. And so there are a lot of secrets to recovering your passion in the fifth house. The fifth house is also about artistic expression. Um, so it's very connected to um, theater and dance and kind of artistic expression that comes out kind of in a performance area. And I remember studying Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, and she would say that if you've got planets blocking your fifth house, she didn't talk about astrology. I talked about astrology. You have to kind of do new things. You have to walk into a new neighborhood and experience new suns. I'm one of these people that have artistic blocks. I'm actually a great poet, but I don't. I'm kind of blocked sometimes about it. And she says you kind of have to. I took her class on the artist's way, and she used to talk about you have to do things new. You have to step out of the box, and the fifth house really should force us to kind of see life in a new way in order to kind of grow and to express our creativity. If we don't express our creativity, then at some level we die. Let's talk about the sixth house. The sixth house is a house of karmic difficulties that express themselves through enemies, debts, struggles, and challenges. Today, it also represents kind of drudgery. It's kind of what we have to do every day. The 12th house is about sacrifice. The sixth house is about routine. And routine for most of us is going to work every day. If we're a parent, maybe our routine is taking care of our 2-year-old and stuff like that. But sixth house is kind of about routine. And what happens is, the ancient texts used to talk about the sixth house as the house of enemies. Now, most of us don't have real enemies like the enemies that occur in battle or war. Sometimes those people do turn up. Usually enemies show up today in the modern world as co-workers, people who kind of snipe at you and compete with you to get a raise or to kind of look better in front of the boss. So co-workers is kind of an important karaka or significator for enemies. Debts are connected to the sixth house, struggles and challenges. Health is the most important thing about the sixth house, and we'll talk a lot about it, but it's also very connected to vices, anger, lust, greed, all the kind of Christianity talks about the 7 deadly sins. The Vedic people have 6, and attachment is another one. So the challenges of the sixth house is they teach us to accept with steady endurance and patience and maintain with a stoic attitude. So the whole key to the sixth house is that we have to have discipline. If we don't have discipline in anything that we do, we have to have discipline to go to work every day. You put Saturn debilitated in the sixth house, which I see sometimes. People just are lazy. They don't want to go to work. They really hate going to work, and they eventually create problems and get fired because they just hate going to work. So sixth house requires us to be to have discipline, and we have to honor discipline. Discipline, unfortunately, is doing things that are routine that we don't like doing. Exercise is discipline. I have a problem with that at the moment. We know we hate the discipline of regular exercise, but if we don't eat it, if we don't do exercise, we get fat or we have health problems. Discipline is diet. If we don't cook nutritious foods for ourselves and moderate our diet, we develop health problems. And so we can study the sixth house for healing crises connected to things that we're not disciplined about. We're not disciplined about diet and nutrition. and exercise, then we develop health problems. And you can always see this in studying the sixth house. Mars, the carcass for the sixth house are Mars and Saturn. They're the key planets. And Mars is about discipline. He's a soldier. He has to kind of show up at guard duty every day, and he hates it. But he does it because he wants to protect his country. Saturn also is very disciplined. Saturn's kind of disciplined about doing daily meditation. Because Saturn has that wonderful kind of meditative side. It also governs work. But Saturn, work is not going to work. Doing work every day is not fun for a lot of people, and meditating every day is hard. Sometimes hard for people. But so the secret with the sixth house is to kind of find the discipline of Mars and Saturn to overcome our laziness. The seventh house. Now, the seventh house is kind of interesting. Everybody thinks seventh house is relationship. Yes, it is. And it's not even marriage always. There's actually 4 houses that we look at for marriage. We have to look at the 4th house for domestic, creating a home, the 2nd house for family, the 12th house for kind of sacrifice from marriage. So traditionally in India, marriage is about creating children. So they have arranged marriages that don't always work. They're not always romantically. And they're about sacrifice to bring in children to the world and develop children. So 12th house is often connected to marriage also. 7th house is kind of more romantic, is relationship too. It is marriage, but it's not nearly as much as you think. Now, the interesting thing about the 7th house is it represents sunset. So our rising sign is what's coming up on the eastern horizon, is sunrise, and sunset is what's going down when the sun's going down. Now, most of you probably know by the time the sun's going down, you're getting tired, you're reaching for the sugar and the candy bars and the coffee, and that's because there's no energy in the 7th house, actually. It's very kind of, if you probably know not to schedule meetings at the end of the day because there's no energy from to kind of find them. You usually feel like pretty horrible and you want to take a nap, or if you're smart, you meditate or do something powerful to kind of get through that kind of energy. So 7th house is, and if you drive into the sunset, you're driving west and you drive into the sunset, you're kind of blinded by the sun. You can't see, and you have to put on your sunglasses, you have to put your visor down. So the 7th house is a real problem house. The 7th house is also kind of what's called a maraka. It's a death-inflicting house, and which is why relationships, when they don't work, create kind of death-like circumstances for us. So the 7th house is a real problem house because it also is kind of connected to like combust planets. If you have a planet that's too close to the sun in your chart, called asta, which means combust, kind of gets very weak. And so any 7th house is kind of like asta. It's just kind of weak. It doesn't have a lot of dignity. Tends to vanish. So sun in the 7th house may mean father will disappear, or you might not have a strong impact on you. Hitler had sun in the 7th house. His father disappeared early in life, the father figure, because he kind of wanted to replace his lost father who was not there in the 7th house. Planets in the 7th house are weak and they have no practical use. Even if you put like the 9th lord in the 7th house, it may mean that higher education, 9th house is connected to higher education. You put it in the 7th house, you may feel it has no practical use for you. So we always think that planets in the 7th house are good, and most of the time they aren't. Ideally, you don't want any planets in your 7th house. Since planets in the 7th house usually create some kind of relationship problem. Mercury in the 7th house is, if it has no dignity, Mercury is the prince. It's very immature about sex and relationship, and you may attract partners that have affairs. And so you don't want any planet in the 7th house. It usually messes up relationship. It messes up business relationship. Actually, they're very kind of weak. The 7th house is connected to travel. 3rd house, 7th house, and 12th house, 9th and 12th house is connected to travel. The 7th house travel is really kind of comes from the Sanskrit word marga, which means life path. One of the interesting things about the 7th house, which I'm going to do new in my second edition of Secret of the Second House, is look at the seventh house as in terms of life path. Because it's not just about travel across country, although it will bring that up. It's about life path. You put the seventh lord conjunct the ninth lord, you may desire you to find a guru and move towards spirituality as a life path. So there are obviously positive things to everything. Planets in the seventh house are connected to desire, and if you put Sun in the seventh house, it will desire career growth if it's strong and it has dignity. If it's afflicted and if it's poorly placed, it may be selfish and have bad character. So again, in everything in Vedic astrology, there are goods and bads, and you have to know basic astrology, which is does the planet have dignity? Is it if it doesn't have dignity, it causes problems. Saturn, if the Sun is weak in the seventh house, it may lead to opposing the norms of society, and you may suffer from governmental action or authority. Let's move on to the eighth house. The eighth house is a place of where you're being punished for mistakes, and it can bring sudden shocks in life from past karma. The sixth house, you can see your problems. I mean, you see you have a problem with not getting exercise, or you have a problem overeating, or you have a problem with addictive patterns of things that are not good for you. You can see those in the sixth house, and you can do something about them by discipline. The eighth house is trickier because it brings up, it's most feared of the houses, because it brings up kind of karma and sudden shocks out of the blue. I mean, it brings up accidents, hospitalizations, acute illnesses, and things like that. There are good things in the eighth house also. I mean, benefics in the eighth house, they bring good money from partnership, from your making money through your marriage or from business partnership. So nothing is all good or bad. But the secret of the eighth house is that it's also kind of a mystical and occult house. It's considered the occult is not a good word today. Astrology goes under the word occult today, but I like to say that I always see the spiritual side of astrology. So occult, in my mind, means searching for moksha. Eighth house again is a moksha house. It's where we begin our search to kind of transcend our pain and suffering. So we develop. The third house is finding our searching for adolescence. Fourth house is, we kind of create our home. We get married, we settle down, we made a home. Fifth house, we're trying to find our passions and express ourselves. Sixth house, we're going to work every day. Seventh house, maybe we get married. In a place where as we move through life, we develop a relationship. And then all those things we find create problems. Our marriage doesn't work, our work doesn't work. We're not expressing our creativity. And so we create crises for ourselves, which kind of manifest in the eighth house, so that we can search for something deeper and higher in life. Doctors and astrologers come out of the eighth house. So, I mean, they're kind of like I've got Jupiter in the eighth house, so and K2. So there are good things with the eighth house too. It's a very spiritual house, actually. If you put afflicted malefics in the eighth house, then and the chart lord is weak, you have a problem. But I find in spiritual people that they have a strong eighth house because they have a strong inclination toward mystical experience and finding God. And ultimately, when we have these major accidents or we have major acute illnesses, we start looking for answers. We turn to the ninth house. We turn to God. We turn to mysticism. The eighth house is also a place where you're supposed to give back since you failed to give it in the past life. So the remedy is to do remedial action, is to do stuff that you didn't do before. So I have Mercury connected to the eighth house, and I have Jupiter connected to the eighth house. And actually, one of the things that's naturally happened is my writing through Gemini owns my eighth house. My writing, which many of you know from my astrological writing, is a way of giving back, and it's something I've just felt like I had to do, and I'm obsessed with it lately. As you know, I've written 3 books in the last year, but it's kind of my way of giving back, and I think it's a way of kind of getting through some of my eighth house karma. I've got Jupiter there, which is also I have to give back in teaching and spiritual knowledge. So if we fail to give back in the area of the eighth house, that may lead to pain and suffering. Um, Now, the eighth house is also kind of a funny place because it also is a place where we make mistakes due to lack of awareness or poor judgment. This can manifest too if the eighth lord is conjunct another planet or the eighth lord is placed in some place. So let's say you have a connection between the eighth and the 10th houses, or the 10th and the eighth, or the eighth and the 10th, exchange of signs between the eighth and the 10th house. It may mean that you make a lot of mistakes at work, and this creates errors, and you're always changing jobs. I notice that people with 8th and 10th house connections, they're always kind of getting fired and changing jobs rapidly because they're making errors at work, and they may lack ambition at work. So sometimes lack of awareness and making mistakes is connected to the 8th house. The 8th house is also connected to blame. You know, if you have a personality where you tend to blame people, this is connected to the 8th house. Let's say if you have 4th lord in the 8th house, you may tend to always blame your mother for your problems, or 9th lord in the 8th house, you may blame your father. I mean, there are all kinds of ways you can play with this, but it's kind of fun. 9th house. I'm going to take a tea break. I'm going to see if I can take some questions quickly. One of the things I don't like to do in these classes, people say, I've got Jupiter in the 8th house in Gemini with Mars. What does that mean? I don't like to be put on the spot to analyze people's charts out of context without seeing the whole chart. But general questions I love answering. Let me see if there are any questions. There are no questions. Wow. Okay. Okay, let's move on to the 9th house. Let me actually turn off the camera now. Maybe I'm not turning it off, I'm putting it down. I don't know how it shows up on your screen, but so let's look at the 9th house. I didn't put too much in around the 9th house, but 9th house is a house of Dharma and destiny. It's kind of what we inherit from our father. It also represents higher education. So if you're looking at college, and people sometimes ask about college education or something like that, you look at the 9th house and the 9th house lord. It's also connected to guru and finding a guru. So all those things are kind of important. Some people, to me, it's not as auspicious as the 5th house. The 9th house for some people causes problems even. We'll learn that in the Boudica lesson. You know, even if you have a misfortune, can even come from a debilitated planet. If the debilitated 9th lord is running the dasha, you can have problems. If you put Ketu in the 9th house, you'll lack compassion. If you put Rahu in the 9th house, you'll have a misunderstanding about Dharma. You always need a strong Rahu to overcome, a strong Jupiter to overcome Rahu, and a strong Mercury to overcome Ketu. And Rahu in the 9th house usually creates people who are kind of rebels. They rebel against Dharma. In India, I get mothers who call me, and they Rahu in the 9th house, and their sons are not interested in going to the temple with them, and they're going off on some other spiritual path, and they're devastated. And that's what Rahu does in the 9th house. Okay, it's kind of rebels against traditional values. Look at the 10th house. The 10th house is connected to profession, but it's not what you think it is. You don't. 10th house is also about status, but what we do in life, there's actually many different things that we look at for work. So the 10th from the sun is the work that we have to do. So again, the sun chart, which is connected to work naturally, the 10th from the sun is the work that we have to do. The 10th from the moon is the profession we would like to do, and planets 10th from the moon will give us support for career. And so there are actually in my career class, people think, oh, I have to look at the 10th house for my career. There's so many things that you look at for career. There's about 8 or 9 things that I look at. The 10th from the moon in the D9 chart is also very key to career. So 10th house is not just about career, but the interesting thing about the 10th house is that, first of all, this is a secret that no one teaches you. If you were born during the day, so you were born from sunrise to sunset, then the first house, typo here, the first house is most influencing your career. So actually, if you're born during the day, you look at the first house for career and not the 10th house. If you're born during the night, from sunset to sunrise, then you look at the 10th house as having more influence on career. So that's one of those secrets that no one teaches you. I just shared it with you. So 6th house is about everyday work and service. We talked about that. It's kind of 7th house rules business, and because the 10th house is 10th from the 7th, 10th from the 10th is the 7th. So the 7th house is actually a very important business house also. Business partnerships have to be looked at in the 7th house. And sometimes you find that people want to know, well, can I be in business for myself? Well, you compare the Lord of the 6th to the Lord of the 10th to see which one's stronger. If the 6th Lord is stronger than the 10th Lord, then the person probably needs to work for somebody else. And if the 10th Lord is stronger, they may be able to have the courage to have their own business. If you have a weak planet in the 6th house, it may torture you about work and lead to unemployment. I see this all the time. Usually I see a debilitated Saturn or something, which is the Karaka for work, and then they're just really having problems being disciplined. They hate their jobs and they don't want to go. Strong 10th house Lord will make you a good boss. So the interesting thing about the 10th house, which something new I'm teaching in my 2nd edition, is that it represents the mind at work. So it's not just even work or status, it's how our mind functions at work. So when people come to you and they have problems at work, you actually have to look at what planets are in the 10th house. So Moon or Mercury in the 10th house may create too much vacillation. The Moon and Mercury are both mental planets, and if they get afflicted at all, they tend to be all over the place. Put a debilitated Mercury in the 10th house for a Gemini, they just they're all over the place. They can't focus at work. They get into problems. They end up changing jobs a lot. Don't forget, Mercury is the child. Mercury, Sun is the father. He's mature. He's the king. Mercury is the prince. He's the child. He doesn't like the responsibility of work. So actually, Mercury does not do that well in the 10th house because he doesn't. He's not happy. He wants to change jobs all the time. He vacillates. Moon in the 10th house is always concerned about others' feelings at work. Mars in the 10th house is kind of tyrannical and pushy at work and will create headaches. K2 in the 10th house is kind of unpredictable at work. And Jupiter and Venus are the planets you want in the 10th house most because they make wise choices. Of course, Sun in the 10th house is big baller. Is very happy there. Rahu in the 10th house will be great at thinking, but will not lead by example. So we always say, oh, Rahu does really well in the 10th house. Well, yeah, it may give you status at work, and it may actually do some really good things, make you brilliant in creating things at work. But good bosses need to work in the trenches with their employees, and if they're not there in the trenches with their employees, then and that's what Rahu will do in the 10th house, then they're not leading by example, and it creates problems. Saturn in the 10th house is slow and stubborn in making decisions, and it doesn't like listening to other people. So, Saturn's the Karaka for work. It actually doesn't do well in the 10th house because it's just kind of too slow. It won't listen to anybody. Now, the 10th house is also a place where we show a broken home because it's opposite to the 4th house. It's also considered a place of parental presence. So if you have the 9th Lord in the 10th, which normally you think of like is great for good luck with work, and it may be good luck for work, but it may create a broken home. I mean, it may kind of, if you have more energy for your work and you don't show, and you work 60 hours a week and you don't show up at home for your wife, then you end up with a broken home. 4th Lord in the 10th also will create a broken home. Sun and the Moon in the 10th actually can create a broken home. Again, too much energy around work or having the work and home planets kind of mixed up creates problems. 10th house, of course, is a house of achievement. Even K2, I always used to think K2 in the 10th house is a problem, but it actually, can promote achievement, and it does well in the 10th house. And sometimes makes people confused about what they want to do for a living, but it actually can create achievements. K2 is a very funny planet in that way. And Sun and Mars, particularly in the 10th house, promote achievement. Okay, let's move on to the 11th house. So, everybody thinks income is connected into the 11th house. Well, not totally. And again, I told you about the Arudalagna. The Arudalagna is, we show up. And it turns out the 11th from the Arudalagna is really where our money comes from. And that's one of those secrets that people doesn't teach you. And that's just something I've learned from Jaimini astrology. In my case, it's ends up being the same planet. But 11th house is love because it's means fulfillment of desires, gains from everything, vehicles. 11th from the moon shows us the source of wealth and money in our chart. So how you will earn money, you should look at the 11th from the moon, and that's if you have the 11th from the moon afflicted, then you have to do remedial action on the planet owning that house, or the planets in that house to kind of help your money situation. I have a bunch of material on that in my financial astrology class on personal finance. Planets in the 11th house will also tell people, will show you the people that benefit you. So if you have Moon in the 11th house, your mother will benefit you. Sun in the 11th house, government or your boss will benefit you. Connection between the 11th and the 7th houses mean your spouse or business partners will bring in. This is pretty basic. Most people know that kind of stuff, but just bringing it out. But the 11th house is kind of what we want to. Where's the 11th house Lord placed? If it's in the 4th, we most desire property or home. 11th house in the 5th house, connection to the 5th house, maybe we most want children or artistic expression, that kind of thing. So you want the Lord of the 11th in Kendras and Trines and not in the 6th, 8th, 3rd, 6th, 8th, and 12th houses. Funny thing about the 11th house is it's also connected to the right ear. So it's about our ability to hear knowledge. The 3rd house is the left ear. It's the ability to kind of digest and integrate knowledge. And so it's very key for education and relationship. If we have a weak 11th house or 11th house Lord, then we don't listen to our spouse. We don't listen to our professors at work, and we don't learn anything. So we need to kind of have a strong 11th house Lord to kind of be able to listen and to learn. And Saturn, you connect Saturn to the 11th house, we tend to forget. Right? Connected to the 11th house or 11th house Lord tends to get confused. Mars connected to the 11th house or 11th house Lord gets impatient. K2 connected to the 11th house or 11th house Lord, he has no head. He can't listen at all. He's kind of ignorant when it comes to conversations. So, the malefics cause a problem when they're connected to the 11th house Lord or in the 11th house. Inability to learn, inability to communicate. Again, all these problems can be improved with dignity, and we always have to look at that. But there's certain rising signs. We'll talk about this in a little bit, called Bodic, which are Bodica. And like Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, which are the movable signs, they have trouble listening because the 11th house has a natural handicap. And my wife is Libra rising. She's had hearing aids for about 20 years, and she actually keeps them out sometimes now, even because she doesn't want to hear me. So it's kind of very funny. But she's Libra, and so if the 11th house Lord is afflicted, you can definitely cause hearing problems, and it's particularly kind of a major problem for movable signs. Retrograde planets in the 11th house block listening. 11th house Lord connected to 6th, 8th, or 12th will cause problems too. So, 11th Lord in the 12th house, you'll ignore what you hear. So, we talk about the things that we normally want to look at in the 11th house, which is income. Well, it's not even, 11th house isn't even about income. We have to look at 11th from the moon, 11th from the root alignment for income. And 11th house is really about listening. It's about friends. If you read my article, 11th house is about groups, but I can't do everything in this preview. Again, I'm giving you a taste of one small little piece of each lesson. 12th house. The 12th house is my favorite house. It's the house of loss on the material level, which leads to merging with the infinite or moksha. The Vedic astrologer, the Vedic culture really likes the 12th house. And the 12th house is connected with seva, with service, and charity work, philanthropic work, and it's connected to sacrifice. And those are the ways that we should most think about. People are taught to look at the 12th house as loss. Well, that's kind of not true. When we do seva, when we do charity work, we gain a lot of merit. When we raise our kids about ourselves and we sacrifice in our marriage in the 12th house, we gain a lot of merit, and our kids love us, hopefully, and they support us in our old age, and they take care of us. And so there's sacrifice in the 12th house, and that's the key to the 12th house. And if we don't learn the importance of seva and charity and donations and sacrifice in our life, then we have problems in the 12th house. The 12th house is a place where we lose our individual identity to gain freedom, and that can be sacrifice in a marriage. It's a place of clairvoyance, intuition, and dreams. It's a place of sleep. It's a place of isolation and meditation. It's a place of seclusions like monasteries, ashrams. And if it's afflicted, if your 12th house lord is really afflicted and you have really difficult karma to work out, and this does happen, you see it sometimes, the 12th house can land you in prison or in a hospital. And what happens, then you're forced to kind of be isolated and to think about what you've done wrong and to change your life. A friend of mine, who you would never expect it, ended up in prison and was wrongly accused of something he didn't commit. And he said it's really forced him to really kind of think about his life, and he's been doing a lot of meditation there, and he's actually not as miserable as we might think. The 12th house represents things that we cannot see. It's like it's all the dangers that are invisible, whether caused by karma, hidden enemies, or perverted logic of the subconscious. The ancient Greek astrologers used to say the 12th house corresponds to that part of the sky just around the horizon where the stars are obscured by the thick misty exhalations from the moisture of the earth. So it's kind of this time right around before sunrise. Again, rising sign is sunrise, right? And just before sunrise is the 12th house. And anything that goes into the 12th house is kind of lost from sight. And so the key to the 12th house is that it kind of reveals a place of it's a blind spot. If you have my blind spot book, I talked a lot about the 12th house for blind spots, because planets in the 12th house are conscious of their problems. Put Venus in the 12th house. Everybody says Venus does well in the 12th house. Yes and no. I mean, it tends to spend too much money. It may get too involved in sexual energy to kind of take it to kind of a higher level. It may have a shopping addiction. And it may not even be aware of it. You put things in the 12th house, and they're kind of unconscious patterns and they lead to self-undoing. And when you analyze the 12th house for somebody, they often aren't aware of that problem unless they're really mature, and they may do it unconsciously. I mean, I have Saturn in the 12th house, and I had a very unconscious spending addiction pattern. I made a lot of money in my financial years, and but I would just spend it wildly. I would not save it, and it was kind of an unconscious pattern. I wasn't even aware that I was doing it, and then suddenly things change in business, and you suddenly are wondering why you haven't saved all this money that you made. So there are all kinds of problems in the 12th house that kind of lurk. When I talk about the 12th house, kind of this place of blind spots, and so if you have Sun in the 12th house, sometimes it can create, again, with anything in Vedic astrology, if a planet has dignity, it can do well in that house. Dignity, maybe it's exalted, maybe it's in its own house, maybe it's conjunct Jupiter. So planets with dignity don't have the problems as a problem that doesn't have dignity, obviously. So let's say we have a sun that doesn't have dignity in the 12th house. It tends to create people who are blinded by power. They may not see, that they're compensating for low self-esteem and lack of confidence. So, and sometimes, more often, Sun in the 12th house creates, I see low lack of confidence, and people are afraid to get out there and be seen because they don't think they're good enough. And I see that more often. And in either case, it's a huge problem because when the sun's in the 12th house, it's kind of dead, and it can't be. The sun needs to be seen. It shouldn't be low. Moon in the 12th house creates kind of martyrdom and self-sacrifice as a compensation for being alone and confined and lack of maternal sacrifice. So, like martyrdom, my mom, I think, has Moon in the 12th house, and she was like a martyr mom. She was gave everything to her children and would deny everything to herself. And this, there's something beautiful about that. I mean, she was a wonderful person, but I think on some level she suffered. And that's can happen with Moon in the 12th house. Anyway, there's if you want to learn more about blind spots, you can pick up my book, shameless plug here. So the key to the 12th house again is sacrifice, service, marriage devoted to raising children is a place to be. But it's also a place of sleep. It's a place where we check out. I mean, the moksha houses are not just about moksha or enlightenment. Moksha may be kind of checking out. Alcoholism is a form of checking out. We can't deal with our emotions. It's you often find alcoholics having problems with the water signs and the 4th and 8th and 12th houses because they just can't deal with their emotions. It becomes a place of escapism. The 12th house is a place of sleep. Put Saturn in the 12th here, it makes one lazy and prone to rest. I love sleeping. I wouldn't say I'm lazy, but I've got an exalted Saturn. It can't possibly make me lazy, but I do love sleep, and I look forward to sleep every night. Put Mars in the 12th house. It's too restless to sleep. It's not going to sleep very well. I have a whole class on moksha and spiritual astrology. I don't want to get into it, but moksha actually has to be studied from the 12th, from the Atmakarika. Again, one of these things we think we study moksha from the 12th house, from the Rashi chart. No, you actually have to study it. It's 12th from the Atmakarika and the D1 and the D9. There's all these complicated rules in Vedic astrology. 12th house rules feet, and you really have to look at. I've had all these feet problems this year. I really have to look at what's going on with my 12th house Lord. 12th house can be a place where we lose brain power, as it's 12th from the 1st house. The 1st is connected to intelligence, but the Lord of the 1st and the 12th afflicted. The person, may be just lacking the operating system to kind of see their world because they're just kind of too out of the world. They're too into meditation. They're too into sleeping. They're just not aware of their world. 12th house is also a place of addiction and cravings because planets here are aspecting the 6th. I'm very fascinated by, I have a class on the astrology of addiction. It's connected to the 6th house, but the 6th and the 12th house are on the same axis. So planets in the 12th aspect the 6th and planets in the 6th aspect the 12th. So when you get 6th, 12th house oppositions, you get problems. Put Jupiter in the 12th house, you may have a sweet tooth and not be able to fast. So we have to look at addictive patterns and checking out patterns in the 6th and 12th house axis. We'll put Rahu in the 12th house, and we may end up being we may lose enjoyment. Again, Rahu actually wants to check out. Rahu in the 12th house may give mystical experience, but it may even create poverty for itself, because it's so it craves moksha too much. It craves meditation. It checks out in that way. Ketu in the 12th house may experience loss of family and property and children, and success in that may block marriage. Too much checking out. Ketu is strong in the 12th house, but almost too much kind of checking out. Mercury and Venus are obsessed with money in the 12th house and profession and carnal relationships, and then they may have weaknesses for shopping in the 12th house. Sun, Moon, and Jupiter are obsessed with other forms of enjoyment. It may lose control in the 12th house. So most planets don't do well in the 12th house. You don't want planets in the 12th house. If you have planets in the 12th house, they form blind spots of unconscious patterns that kind of block your moksha. And I'm doing a 2.5 hour talk on that in Sedona at the Vedic Astrology Conference in November if you want to come. If you have a strong 12th house with dignity, it may promote a tendency towards charity and philanthropic work. Now, I have Saturn exalted in the 12th house, and it's retrograde, so it makes it even stronger. And I've actually probably done too much service work half my life, and I don't regret that. I mean, it's good merit for future lives, but it did block me from building my business enough, because I put half my time into service work. I think it's a good thing, but it's a bad thing also if it gets out of balance. 12th house can lead to defeatism and frustration and a desire to run away, and sometimes that's running away to an ashram or a foreign country, both things connected to the 12th house. 12th house can get us into trouble with expenditures. Usually it tends to create spending too much. Venus, Jupiter there may spend too much, don't save enough money. If the second house isn't strong, you get into trouble. And this 12th house connected to marriage of sacrifices. Okay, so I'm going to pause here quickly and try to rest my voice. Got through first half of my talk, and I've got some time left. I'm going to, if you have a question, so I'm going to unmute you, and Anais, is that how you pronounce your name? Anais, you had a question? Okay, I've just unmuted you, Anais.
Hey, hi, Barry. Thank you. So I was wondering, you were talking about the 10th house, and you were saying that we could, if born during daytime, we could look at the first house instead of the 10th.
Right, yeah. But it's only one of the things that you would look at. In other words, I mean, people ask me about career, and I look at about, I have a whole class on career. I mean, I look about 10 or 12 things for career, but yeah, but you have to remember to favor the first house over the 10th house if you're born in the daytime.
Okay, thank you.
Kathleen has a question. Kathleen, I've just unmuted you.
Yeah, I was curious, you were talking about the 12th house. I came in late, so I'm sorry, I may miss some things. What house would you see Alzheimer's or dementia? The 12th?
You know, that's something I haven't studied. You would think, you know, it is, the 12th house is about losing one's mind on some level. You know, I think I did mention that in the talk. I have not studied that. I think we would have to we'd have to look and see if people are going through 12th house dosas. I mean, I think with Alzheimer's, you'd have to look at, you know, you have to look at the, if you when I send you the tape, you can hear the lesson. There are so many things connected to the mind. The 4th house is also connected to the mind. The 25th nakshatra is connected to the mind. There are many houses that are actually connected to the mind, but I think the 12th house would be important for Alzheimer's, but I haven't studied it. I think it's a fascinating question and topic.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you for asking that. It's going to be something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's so epidemic, and clearly there's, you know, physiological reasons with toxicity, but it's such a huge thing in today's society that, I mean, there has to be multiple reasons because it's so across the board.
Right, there are multiple reasons, but you know, you have to think too that, you know, the 12th, you know, 12th house is kind of moving us toward, you know, 12th house is about checking out, and you know, moksha houses, when they're not taking us to meditation and the ashram to find enlightenment, they usually push us toward addictions and checking out, sleeping, getting drunk, or taking drugs or something if we're not on a spiritual path, because we can't deal with the unconscious energies that come up in the 12th house. And those also come up in the 8th house and the 4th house also. But all the moksha house, all the water signs and all the 4th, 8th, and 12th houses, they always kind of bring up this emotional grunge, and it forces us either we solve it by finding meditation and spiritual, or we can't deal with it, we check out. So I suspect even people who develop Alzheimer's on some level can't, you would think it's, yes, there are all kinds of physiological problems, but on some level they just end of their life, they're still in pain on some level, and they want to check out and not deal with it, and sometimes it's just physiological. You're right,
Yes, but wouldn't it always show up in the chart?
Yes, it should show up in the chart. Again, I haven't done a study of it. I haven't read of any studies of it. I'm going to put a query out on my astrology groups and see if anybody has done any work on it. I think it's a fascinating question. Um, and I have not encountered, actually, when people come to me for readings, no one's ever asked me about it. And no one's ever even given me their parents' chart and saying, my parent has Alzheimer's, how long are they going to live? It's interesting. It's never come into my life. So I have no experience with it. I'm sorry. Thank you. But I know I'm fascinated. Okay. Any other questions? You can raise your hand. You can write questions. Kathleen wrote the question about Alzheimer's. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the second part of the presentation. One of the things we're going to study in the class, so I talked about the houses. Now I want to talk about different techniques that we're going to use in the class. Because there are many different ways that you can look at the houses. Now I need to, I think I forgot to unmute you, Kathleen, so I'm muting you again so that we don't have any background noise on the tape. So one of the things that is really kind of basic, and I don't know if I thought about it enough, is that the sign owning a house will color its nature. When I first learned Vedic astrology, everybody said, well, houses are everything, signs are 25%. But, signs make a difference in what you say about the house. So, for example, take Libra rising. That's Libra rising. Everybody, the stereotype for Libra rising, oh, they're harmonious relationship people. Well, the reality is, I'm married to a Libra, if you know a lot of Libras, and if Venus is not well placed, don't forget Aries owns the 7th house, and so that's Mars, and so Aries is naturally into fighting and combat, and so by nature Libras, because Aries owns the 7th house, inheriting a combative nature in relationships. And I'm kind of amazed the more Libras, once I started realizing this, the more Libras I kind of met, the more I kind of realized, of course, there could be mitigating factors, Jupiter in the 1st or Venus in the 1st aspecting the 7th will, create harmony or something like that, or Mercury in the 1st, aspecting the 7th will be good. But, if Venus is not well placed and is with a malefic, Aries by nature for Libras is going to create. So all the houses have to be looked at in this way, and all the rising signs have to be looked in this way. And one of the things I do in my class is I give you an appendix talking about what happens if Aries owns the 7th house, or what happens if Capricorn owns the 7th house. Scorpio rising, Taurus owns the 2nd house. So that means Taurus is a very earthy, sweet sign. You're going to attract partners who are naturally kind of going to be more stuck, that aren't going to kind of change relationships as much. They're fixed signs. So you have to think about all these things, and it gives you much more information. Now there are other things that I'm going to teach that are more advanced, and I'll go over them briefly. And we're going to do them actually in the 1st through 9th weeks. One of the things that I've done is I've set up the class. It's 18 lessons, so you can take the first 9 weeks. It's $195, and in the first 5 or 6 weeks of the first 5 weeks of the class, we're going to kind of just discuss some of these. I wouldn't call them advanced things, but they're things that aren't taught very much. They're not hard to learn, but they influence houses. And what happens is that if you know a little bit of astrology, you say, oh, I've got this really strong house, and I've got an exalted planet in it, and life's going to be wonderful when I get to that dasha, and it doesn't happen. And you think astrology is worthless, but the answer is always there. There's so many things that we have to look at, and these are some of the things. They have fancy names. I have to kind of translate them. And again, I told you at the beginning of the class that Sanskrit names kind of, I think, turn us off. But these are the official names. So dispositors. Now, this is kind of basic knowledge, but we forget to look. There's all kinds of dispositors and ways this shows up. Dispositor of a sign, of a nakshatra, of any varga, of a planet. So let's say a planet may have dignity in a sign in a good house, but the owner of that house is 6 or 8 or 12 houses away. So, so for example, Taurus rising, Saturn is the best planet for it. And you put Saturn in the 5th house, you would think Lord of the 9th and the 5th, wonderful placement, Raj Yoga. My Saturn period is going to be wonderful. I'm blessed and stuff like that. But what if Mercury, the Lord of Virgo, is in Leo, 12 houses away? Or if Mercury, the Lord of Virgo, is in 7 houses away, which we said is like sunset, it's kind of a place of dead, and it's debilitated. So suddenly that Saturn, the dispositor of Saturn, loses all this great energy. So one of the things that, I think this is a new lesson for this class I'm developing, is that you have to look at dispositors carefully, because they, and I always used to use the analogy of like landlords and tenants. Like if you're in a house and your landlord is in the 12th house in jail or in a foreign country, you try to communicate him about the broken pipes. He doesn't hear you. You can't do anything about it. So the dispositor is really important for telling you about the house, and it's something that's overlooked. And dispositors come up in 4 or 5 major ways, and it's something that's overlooked in Vedic astrology quite a bit. So we're going to do a whole lesson on that. It's a new executive decision. I just am adding it because it's really important. Dr. Rashi. Now, Dr. Rashi, I need a translation for it. I'm going to call it psychological block. Basically, Dr. Rashi is kind of causes negative thinking around something, which blocks the manifestation of the energy from that house from manifesting. Because if we think it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. It's like a negative defeatism. Defeatism is probably can't be negative defeatism, but it's kind of defeatism, because if we, I had a friend and she kept thinking, I'm not going to get a job, no one wants me, I'm no good, and she stayed in the house and she sold and she didn't get a job, but you kind of, sometimes you can have these kind of hidden psychological weaknesses in the chart that kind of create these, what I would call call these things. And the way this shows up, it's connected to the lunar day that you're born on. So, and it's because kind of there's these shadows that are cast. The lunar days are connected to the, are somehow kind of connected to the moon, and the moon is connected to the mind. And so if you were born, I was born on, let's see, if you're born on the 7th lunar day, and for those of you who don't know, lunar days, I have to teach a whole class on this, but we'll just look at Bill Cosby because it came up. Bill Cosby was born on the 5th lunar day, and if we look at the 5th lunar day, it means it's called Panchami 5, the 5th lunar day. It means Gemini and Virgo have some Dagda Rashi. That means that they have some hidden psychological weakness. So let's pull up Bill Cosby again. So that's his 4th and 7th houses. And in a sense, we know that Bill Cosby has had a huge hidden problem with relationships, because he would, date rape women and drug them so that he could have wild sex with them. We saw that also with Venus here, but now we're seeing the 7th house lord of romantic relationship is Dr. Rashi. And so it has some like hidden psychological tint. He probably didn't think he was doing anything wrong, and he did it for years. So, it's kind of this hidden psychological. So I don't want to go into too much detail with this, and I actually don't. Argala. Now, Argala is something advanced in Vedic astrology, and Parashara talks a lot about it, and it's not taught very much, and it's really important. I have if you get my book on finding your blind spots, I have a really clear article on there on it. And Argala is Argala means bolt, and it's kind of this kind of influence. It's actually something that's even more important than an aspect. We learn aspects in Vedic astrology, but Argala is another form of a kind of an aspect or an influence on a house, and it's a huge kind of thing, and it really, and again, it's another reason why we wonder why something doesn't work. So. Argala can also be hidden support. So, so I'll give you an example. So, there are houses, there are pairings of houses that go together, and it's the second and the 12th houses have a relationship. The 11th and the 3rd houses have a relationship. The 4th and the 10th houses have a relationship, and the third, and then there's our minor Argalas too that I talked about in my Argala. But these are the major ones. So the second house is the house of support. The second house, I'm sorry, is the house of wealth and gains and family. And the 12th house is the house of expenditures and sacrifice. And so if you have more planets in the second house than the 12th house, that's good that you're able to accumulate savings. If you have more planets in the 12th house and no planets in the second house, then your expenditures are blocking your ability to save. And that's just one simple way of doing it. But there's this whole kind of complex psychological relationship, because you have the 4th and the 10th houses relationship. It means there's an archetypal relationship between home and work, between, and so if you have the 4th house, which is your happiness from home, if you have more planets in the 4th house, and they have good planets in the 4th house, like Jupiter, Moon, Venus in your 4th house, there could be happiness in your life and happiness from home. But if you have a lot of malefics in the 10th house blocking it, then let's say you have no planets in the 4th house and you have 3 planets in the 10th house. That means that work, there's too much energy around work, and it blocks domestic happiness, and you're putting all your energy. So this one of the things I put together in my article, and we'll have a lesson on the course, is the way that these houses have this archetypal psychological blocking influences, and you have to look at them because if you look at any house in a chart, you can just look and see you can look at any house. So let's look at I don't want to use Bill Cosby. Let's look at John Lennon. Well, this is kind of a funny thing. John Lennon actually had I think his estate when he died was worth over 100 million, obviously, from all those wonderful Beatle albums. Now, when you look at his second house, when we look at his first house, you've got Saturn and Jupiter in the second house, so it's creating gains to his self. He doesn't have any blocking planets in the 12th house, so his first house, even in the first house, which kind of might make him unknown. Again, I wouldn't judge his chart this way. I would look at his real logna, which is, what is his real logna? The real logna is Taurus. So people saw him as this kind of, as a Taurus person, and Venus was in the 4th, having Digbala here, and Venus in sign of Leo. So people saw him as a Taurus. How he felt inside with Ketu in the 1st is he craved liberation. Ketu very powerful in the 1st house here. But I was trying to look at Argala here to show an example of Argala in his house. And I'm not actually Ketu. It's not a good example. Look at mine. Okay. So I'm just doing my house because my chart because I know. So we said the Argala can involve the second and 12th house, planets that are second and 12th from each other. So if we look at my I'm in trouble with this example here. Let's look at my life. So I've got a Papakatara yoga. So I have Rahu and Saturn hemming in my moon. It's one of my more difficult things in my chart. But I've got a very strong Saturn in the 12th house, which has created a lot of energy toward seva and service work. And it's not offset enough because Rahu is kind of debilitated in Sagittarius. It has some strength, but in a sense, my tendency toward moksha and toward sacrifice was stronger than my tendency toward saving money. And so much of my life, I didn't save much money, even though I made a lot of money, because I was putting that energy into charity and philanthropic work. And so that's kind of how that's kind of operating here. The 12th house is strong. The 12th house energy is kind of working here. Now, this is a very complicated concept. We'll do a lesson on it. It's in the second edition of my class. It was not in the first edition of Secret of the Houses. But it's very important work, and we really need to understand it. But you can pick up my book if you want to learn more about it. But it's, we could probably do 5 lessons on Argala, because to really get it, it takes some time. But we need to introduce it. Then we have Bhattaka. So Bhattaka is another hidden psychological influence. And I talked a little bit about it before. Like Bhattaka, you could have basically, Bodhana is kind of a hidden influence that comes with certain rising signs. So for fixed signs, which are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, the ninth house has an automatic Bhattaka. And so even though we think the ninth house is always good, for those signs, the ninth house has some problems. And for the movable signs, which I talked about before, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, the Bhattaka signs are the 11th house. So they have natural problems with hearing and friendships and income. So, and the dual signs, which you all know, are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. They have problems with the 7th house. They have Bhattaka with the 7th house. So they all have relationship problems and business partnership problems. And those are just kind of archetypal problems that happen just because of your rising sign. And if there's a malefic involved, then it even creates even a more difficult level of a problem. And people sometimes don't understand why they have these problems. There's kind of a hidden influence that's innate. It's a fascinating area of topic. For example, Libra rising. Now, I'll take my wife's chart again. She has Libra rising, so she has this hearing problem, which I talked about. But she also has problems with friends. Now, she thinks she's got Jupiter in the first. Let me bring up her chart real quickly. I don't think she'll mind. Okay, my wife's Libra rising. She's got Jupiter in the first. Now, if you know anything, anytime you put Jupiter in the first, everybody loves you. You're magnanimous. She's an amazing woman. Everybody loves her, and she's Libra rising. So she's got this double sweetness. Libra rising and Jupiter here, but she thinks that nobody will call her and ask her for lunch, and that nobody likes her. And the sun, which owns the 11th house, which is connected to friends, is pretty. You can't afflict the sun, but the sun's kind of it's connected with Mars very tightly here, and it's connected to Mercury, which owns the 12th house here. So she somehow thinks nobody likes her, nobody asks her for dinner, and she kind of is very antisocial. Now, Libra is a very social animal. Jupiter in the first, everybody loves, and yet she thinks, because of this Bhattaka influence, that nobody wants to call her and no one likes her. You know, it's just kind of this twisted psychology. And this comes up all the time in Boudica. It's quite fascinating. We'll spend a lesson on that. Okay, other things that we'll do, we'll look at Achilles heels for charts. Like Pisces rising has trouble with fathers because Leo is the natural sixth house from Pisces. Aquarius rising has natural problems with mothers because Moon is the natural sixth house. There are all these kind of hidden kind of Achilles heels in people's charts. Sometimes they're connected to the elements. Scorpios have trouble with the ether element because they're way too intuitive. And so Jupiter is a problem for them. So we're going to learn things like that. And we'll also look at the psychology of human development in the houses. I have an article about this in my book, and something that fascinates me. It's our closing lesson in the class, and how we move through the houses and to learn certain life lessons. I don't want to go through that. There's so many things in this class. We'll learn about the Purusharthas, which are the types of houses, the Dharma houses, the Kama houses, the pleasure houses, the wealth houses, the Dharma houses, and the moksha houses. So we have a lesson on that. And we have a lesson, and we're always going to be looking at Bhavat Bhavam, which is, you know, people get so fixed on ways of looking at the chart, but you know, the ninth from the ninth house is your father's father. That's your grandfather. The second is your wife's money, so it's kind of your money if you're married, you know. So fourth from the fourth is your grandmother. So you can take any house and you could, you know, do any transposition from it. You know, the seventh from the fourth is your wife's, you know, relationship. You know, so it's kind of you always have to remember this principle because there's so many extrapolated ways of looking at things. So there's infinite number of information in the houses here, and we have to remember to look at that when we're doing houses. So I'm gonna go back to. I need to save my voice for my next class. Like an idiot, I scheduled 2 classes today, but I couldn't find another way to fit in the preview. So I want to bring us back to the first slideshow. So again, I have to do a shameless plug. I have 72 pages on Secrets of the Houses in my book. If you don't want to take my class, I understand. I've got a wealth of knowledge in my book here, Finding Your Blind Spots Using Astrology. It is on Amazon on hard copy. It's on my website for $19.95 if you want a PDF. Shameless plug. Book. Nobody makes money from books. I mean, if you knew how much work went into this book, you would be shocked at it. So I'm here to share knowledge. I'm not going to get rich by selling book. My almanac, many of you have. It's also on Amazon now in the hard copy. It's on the PDF version if you want to download it cheaper at $19.95. Again, I'm the expert on transits, and there's a lot there. And then my class again starts on Saturday, May 5th. You can. Sometimes people need payment programs. It is $375 if you sign up for the whole thing. It's on my website at appliedvedicastrology.com. And it gives you, I'll send you a link for it after the class. I'll send you copies of the notes for this class. And I'll send you a copy of the videotape. There are people, you know, there were 50 people that signed up for this class, and now we only have 9 people left. So if you're interested in taking the class, you can email me. And you can visit my website. It's at the bottom of the courses section, and I'll send you a link if you're interested in signing up for it. If you just want to take half the class, some people feel like they don't want to study all the houses, or they take an 18-week class. You can take it for 9 weeks for $195, and you'll get all the material on Argala and Boudica and Secret of the Elements and Bhavat Bhavam and all these kind of advanced techniques for looking for houses in the first part of the course. So you can take that part separately. You can take the whole thing, and it's one of my best classes, so I'm pretty excited about it. For those of you who want to meet me in person, I'll be at the Sedona Vedic Astrology Conference talking about moksha and the blind spots to moksha in November. I'm also teaching a retreat at the Boone North Carolina ashram, connecting Vedic astrology, hatha yoga, and spirituality. And again, that will be on my website soon. And for those of you who don't want to take the Secret of the Houses classes, I have, if you go click on courses on my website, Applied Vedic Astrology, I have about 15 classes now that I've completed that are in canned form. You can watch them at your own level. I've got courses on money remedies and personal finance. The Secret of the Houses class is available in the old edition. I'm actually not making it available now because I have a second edition coming out. I have a class on relationship, 7 lessons. I'm going to be repeating that this summer live in an expanded version of 14 lessons. I have 2 classes on remedies, and I have there's a wealth of classes. I love teaching. I don't do it for money. I do it because I'm passionate about it. So again, I'm going to open it up. So again, visit my website under the course tab. If you need help, email me at barry@appliedvedicastrology.com. And there's a contact link on my website. So I'm going to open the mic up for the people who stayed here. I'm going to unmute you all, and you can mute yourselves, and that will give you a chance to ask questions live. If you don't want to ask a question, you can turn your green mic red so that you don't have the TV or the blender going in the background. But I have unmuted you all if you would like to ask a live question. So this tape will be posted to YouTube probably by Monday. I will send you a link to if you want a copy of it, and I will send you the PowerPoints. And I'll send some follow-up information about the class. I have a passion about this class, as you can tell, and I'm kind of bored the way that people teach houses, like 4th house mother, 9th house father, 3rd house brothers, 3rd house communications. The houses are totally fascinating, and there's so much depth there, and you'll be amazed at what come out of this class. So, any questions? Jamie, you have a question? Okay, Jamie's gratitude no. Okay. Yeah, how do we deal with Mars in the 4th house? Yeah, 4th house. Kathleen, I have to look at the whole context of your chart. I don't know what your rising sign is, or what planets are connected to Mars, or what nakshatra it's in. There is always a remedy for everything. Mars in the 4th house creates relationship problems. It wants to fight. It doesn't want to settle down. I mean, you have to kind of be able to catch that energy, but there, it depends on the sun and the nakshatra and whether planets are aspecting and whether their houses are owned, and there are mantras for it. I mean, you can't. The general mantra for Mars is connected to Hanuman, and Hanuman gives you the problem. So you can listen to the Hanuman Chalisa on a Tuesday. It's a general remedy for Mars, but again, to be specific, I'd have to know your chart. Okay. Other questions? Other answers? Okay.
I do have another question about that. Jupiter is supposed to be, the great beneficent. I found like right now Jupiter was in my 4th house, and it just basically blew up Mars. So instead of it being great, as everyone predicts Jupiter going to her house describes, it actually magnified everything. And I've gone online and I've read this, other people have said that, and I just don't think people address that enough, that Jupiter is just not necessarily always good. If it's connected with a malefic, it just makes it bigger.
Right, that's true. What's your rising sign, Catherine?
I'm Leo. I've got Leo sun. It's my Leo. It's 28 Leo is my rising, and
Okay, so
my sun is 1 degree Leo.
Okay, and then so you've got your 4th house is Scorpio.
Yeah, I like my Mars is like 0 to 1 degree Scorpio, barely in there.
So it is Sandi. It is kind of afflicted there, and then Ketu is the secondary ruler of of Scorpio, and K2 could be the primary ruler, so that may be the primary ruler of your fourth house. Again, we'd have to see if there are more planets with K2 than Mars in the chart. Normally that would make K2 the ruler. And then Jupiter, yeah, Jupiter and Mars aren't always friendly, you're right. I mean, Mars actually afflicts Jupiter more than Jupiter afflicts Mars, but there may be some K2 influence there too that we have to look at. That may not be noticed.
Okay.
K2 is the co-ruler of Scorpio. So, and there may be other things connected to problems with that fourth house. Yeah, and I would not blanketly say that Jupiter doesn't, I have Jupiter going through my first house now. Does it make me happy? Well, maybe I'm a little jollier, but I've gained 10 pounds, Jupiter can cause problems in funny ways. You're right. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Okay, final Jeopardy answer. Anybody have a question or an answer? So I do hope you'll consider my class. I'm passionate about my classes. You can watch my YouTube channel if you want to see previews of my other classes. Basically, this class is like the first class and a preview for my Secret of the Houses class. There are previews of all my classes on YouTube, and my YouTube channel is Financial Astrology by Barry Rosen. So if you like my classes, you can listen to my YouTube channels. And if you need financial help, you can work out payment programs. I put an enormous amount of time into these classes. They run about $25 a class. They're very inexpensive. You don't want to take a class, you can certainly get some information from my books. Okay, thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to take a rest and rest my voice. We'll see you when we see you, and look for some emails from me. Have a great day.
Thank you.